Hey everybody, this is Dave with Growing the Home Garden. Today I wanted to take a few minutes and talk to you a little bit about growing basil. Basil is one of my favorite plants to grow in the garden. I use it all the time as a companion plant, along with my tomatoes and peppers and things like that. And it's also really easy to propagate and root. So if you want a ton of basil, it is an excellent one to try to propagate, especially if it's like maybe your first time ever propagating a plant. It's a good one. So let's go through, let's talk about basil a little bit. I'll show you a couple of the kinds of basil that I've got growing right now, and then I'll also show you how to root it, and it's so easy. Anybody can do this one. So here is one of my absolute favorite varieties, and I grow it every year. This is cinnamon basil. I wish I could convey the fragrance of this through the camera, but just trust me, it is so good. It is delicious, and we will mix that in with our pestos, our spaghetti sauces, and different things like that. What's really nice about it, it's got this dark colored leaf here, but the stems are this nice purple color. The blooms come up and they will be purple also. I've been pinching them back because I don't really want it to go to bloom yet, but you can start to see that it's already starting to put out some flowers on it. Now with basil, the more you pinch it, the more bushy it gets, and so that's your goal. You want to make sure that you have a nice bushy plant with lots of foliage so that you can harvest that foliage. Now over here, if you'll forgive the weeds, is a dark purple colored basil, and I believe this one is Red Rubin is the name of this particular type. But I've grown a few of the different types like that. I'm not a huge fan of like the Thai basils and stuff. I kind of like them to taste the Italian way with like a Genovese basil might. Now I like to incorporate my basil around my tomato plants, and if you've watched some of my tomato videos before, I've talked a little bit about using it as a companion plant. And one of the things I like the most is it helps to disguise the scent of the tomato, and so that predators of tomato plants like the tomato hornworm will not bother it. It really just disguises it, keeps them away. Plus, when you do let it go to bloom and start to collect seed and stuff, as it's blooming, it's going to attract other pollinators to the area, a lot of which are going to be wasps. And the way that works is that the caterpillars that are feeding off of your plants get scared of the sound of the wasps and the bees that are around. And then they don't quite come over to your tomato plants and bother them. So it's kind of a good thing to have those flower. If you want to have a couple of them just go to flower. And also the flowers are edible. This beautiful bushy basil is right next to our pepper plants. So I'm going to pinch it back a little bit. In fact, I'll probably use this one for doing the cuttings here in a little bit. And it is just looking great. I'm really happy with that. It is starting to get some flower buds forming in the middle of that. But all you have to do is to continue pinching them back and using the basil. The more you use it, the bushier it gets and the fewer flowers you're going to have. Eventually I'll let it go to seed, and then I'll try to collect some of the seeds from it. And here's a little messy bed just outside of our vegetable garden where I just threw out some seed just to see what it would do. And basil is one of those plants that is extremely easy to grow from seed. You just need to throw it out there and it'll grow. So don't think you have to go to the store and buy a $3 or $4 basil plant. You can do it yourself. Buy a $2 packet of basil seeds and sprinkle over a garden area that you want them to grow in, and they'll do fine. Now this is an Italian Genovese basil, just like that other one, along with a few weeds mixed in. There's always weeds, that's for sure. But basil is just a delicious plant. We make a ton of pesto. We love eating that. And so what I think the plan is this year is we're going to collect as much basil as we can, make a lot of pesto, and store it in the freezer for wintertime so we don't have to go out and buy jarred pesto and things like that later. So what do you do exactly to propagate basil? Well, there's just a couple things you need. Get a little pair of pruners of some kind. These little snips work great. And a little jar of water. That's all you need. Now, basil roots extremely easy in a jar of water. It's one of the few plants that I would actually recommend just do it in a jar of water. However, you don't have to. You can put it in soil. Any kind of a typical rooting mix will do that. Just regular old garden soil, you can shove them in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these snips and we're going to get a few cuttings. So here we are at the cinnamon basil, and I'm just going to try to show you what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to come down and snip off a pretty good sized cutting. And this one I can actually break up into two. You'll notice here I've got this set of leaves right there and this set of leaves up here. So I'm going to split that into two. And basil will root all along the stem if I put it in the water. So all I got to do now is trim it back just a little bit, and I can collect those leaves and use them for dinner tonight if I want to. And do the same on the other. Just snip, keep a couple of the smaller leaves in there, and then we'll take our water right here and just drop them in. Can it get any easier than that? It really can't. What we're going to do is bring these inside. We're going to set them on a windowsill. And I am going to try to keep them propped up a little bit. I probably have a little bit too much water in there, so this one's too, but just like that. But I'm going to take a bunch of the cinnamon basil right here. Got some nice long stems here. This one's not going to do more than, say, one cutting. But we can go through and get quite a few. And the other thing that this does is it actually allows us to do some pruning, so we can cut back the basil and it's not going to flower as quickly. You generally will want to kind of pull off any flowers that you might see on these cuttings, because you don't want to have the plant exerting energy to go into the flower formation. Now when you're trimming plants or pruning plants, the more you prune them, the bushier they become. The apical bud up here at the very top, when you pinch it back, it tells the rooting hormone to start producing branches and buds and leaves off of the other nodes here. So we're going to just do quite a few of these, just because we want to. Now basil is one of those plants that deer never bother, that rabbits never bother, and so you can use it to help protect other plants around it. They're just not real keen on the flavor, I guess. They're really missing out. So over here we're going to do the same thing on this one, the Genovese basil, just like that. Drop it in. And remember to prune back any extra leaves. Now, toward the end of the season, before the last frost date, if you go out to your garden and you gather up some of your basil cuttings, you can bring it indoors, get it to root, and then pot it up, and you can grow basil indoors throughout the wintertime. So that's just one other tip that you can do with your basil. So in about a week to 2 weeks, your basil is going to start forming some roots. It's going to appear at first like little tiny white nubs, and they'll grow pretty quickly. So probably within 3 weeks of starting to take the cuttings, you'll be able to put them out in a pot in the garden, or just put them in a pot indoors and you can enjoy it in your kitchen. So lots of different ways and options to enjoy your basil down the road. But it won't take long. You should be highly successful with this method, just doing it in water. And as I said before, basil is one of the few plants that I do recommend using water for, because it's just so easy. Okay, if you look at these, I probably have about 5 or 6 cuttings in there, and you can do a lot of cuttings in a small little jar. Now if you prefer, just take the cuttings and stick them in some moist soil, and that will work fine too. And I'm going to show you that next. Okay, so I went ahead and I took the cuttings already, but I just want to show you how to prep these cuttings and put them in the soil. So all I'm doing is I'm going to pinch off all the side shoots, okay, and I'm going to set that in here. Now if your soil is a little bit more firm, you have a little bit more trouble getting in there, you can take a little stick or something and kind of pre-put in a little hole for it. See, this one's about ready, just a couple little pinches, just like that. Now just slide it in, and that helps prevent any damage that might happen to that stem area. So it's really easy to do here. And I'm just tossing the leftover leaves for now into a garden bed area where maybe it will impart some of that masking ability to that garden bed and protect our beans that are starting to come up over here. It's taken me a while to get the beans this year. I think I've got some really old seed. So basically that is all you do. Now the next step, I'm going to go in, I'm going to water this, and I'm just going to keep it wet as it is. I'm going to keep it in a semi-shady spot so it doesn't get burned out because of the heat of the sun, because it's been pretty hot lately. And that's really all there is to it. Now one question you might have, if basil is so easy to grow from seed, why would you even want to do cuttings? Well, the reason for that is if you want to preserve the exact same type, because basil will cross-pollinate with each other, and so you might not get the exact same cinnamon basil the following year if you grew something near it. If you had a lime basil or a lemon basil, they could have cross-pollinated, and then maybe you'll end up with something that's not the same quality as what you had before. So you might want to do that if you're saving seeds. If you're just ordering seeds, then you probably don't need to. But what if your plant has already gotten some substantial size, you would like more of it, but you don't want to wait the time to germinate seed? These will grow faster. Well, once they start developing roots, they will speed up and they'll be a little bit faster than starting something from seed. Because your seed germination time, you're looking at 7 to 10 days, and then that's getting this big. Okay, so these are already that big, so you're skipping ahead and you're just getting a little bit of extra time for it. Plus, if you've got to trim them anyway, why not go on and make some more, make yourself a really nice large size basil area. So just some thoughts there on why you might want to propagate it as opposed to growing it from seed. Both methods are great. You can do either one very successfully, and I do it both ways, and that's why. So if you liked this video on growing basil, please hit the like button and subscribe. I'd love to have you along to show you more garden stuff as our garden grows throughout this summer and into the fall. So again, thanks for watching.